If my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, and my tunes were played on the harp unstrung, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? It's a hand-me-down.
On July 9th, 1995, Jerry Garcia, the beloved guitarist, singer, spiritual leader, and ineffable heart of the Grateful Dead, stepped onto the stage at Chicago's Soldier Field to perform before a massive audience of adoring fans. Many bands and musical artists have ardent fans. Some even go by affectionate names like Beyoncé's Beehive or Taylor Swift's Swifties or Nicki Minaj's Barbs. But arguably no group of fans is more genial and lovable than the Deadheads, who followed around and traded bootleg concert tapes of their favorite jam band for decades. Even though the members were all middle-aged with their long hippie hair graying or thinning by the mid-90s, the fans were no less enthusiastic. And even if people have personal favorites in the band, there's no question that Jerry Garcia was the favorite. He was John Lennon and Paul McCartney rolled into one. Of course, the guitar legend was also visibly spent by this point in his career. His voice was hoarse, his hands were unsteady, and his stage energy waned quickly due to years of unmanaged diabetes, sleep apnea, smoking, and substance abuse. Friends would comment that the strain of the near-constant touring had never felt more brutal. In the weeks preceding that night, Garcia's health had been a quiet but persistent battle. He was acutely dehydrated, overweight, and slowed by the cumulative toll of decades on the road and a lifestyle that left him little room for self-care. A longtime observer of the band noted in hindsight that managing his diabetes required constant vigilance, a regimen Jerry never fully embraced. If left unmanaged, diabetes and the secondary health consequences of the disease can reduce a lifespan by around 10 years. Add in the nightlife, the drugs, and the rock and roll lifestyle, and Garcia was essentially a ticking time bomb. Put simply, his body and chosen profession were a deadly combination. But despite his declining health, Jerry Garcia hadn't given up on life. In July 1995, he admitted himself into the Betty Ford Center, hoping to finally get clean once and for all and commit himself to a better lifestyle. Unfortunately, his stay was brief. Within 2 weeks, he transferred to Serenity Knolls, a small drug rehab facility located in the woods north of San Francisco. Those closest to the rocker said he told bandmates he was planning to wrap up the rehab stint and then go vacation in Hawaii, but it turned out to be a casual deflection for a difficult truth. After the show in Chicago, Jerry largely retreated from public view entirely. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no final phone calls, just a quiet slipping away. And then came the heartbreaking news. As gentle as it was devastating, Jerry Garcia had died of a heart attack in his room at Serenity Knolls on August 9, 1995, just 1 month after that final Soldier Field show. Longtime bandmate Bob Weir, still reeling from the loss, later shared a dream he had the night Garcia died. In the dream, he said Jerry appeared strong and vibrant, black hair, regal, even wearing a cape, as if stepping through the veil. The next morning, Weir woke to the news that his friend had passed away. Jerry Garcia was just 53 years old. I'm Derek Kaufman.
I'm Jason Beckerman.
And this is Last Days, Jerry Garcia.
As news of Garcia's death broke, his Grateful Dead bandmates quickly responded to calls from the press to express their sadness over the loss.
Generations, it's a night of national mourning. The leader of their tribe is dead, Jerry Garcia, the man who led the Grateful Dead through 3 decades of adulation, died today in California at the age of 53.
The millions of fans that would call themselves Deadheads and still wear the tie-dyes and all, they're never going to get over this. I think it's going to be very much, this is the most tragic death since John Lennon.
Bassist Phil Lesh said simply, quote, "I was struck numb. I had lost my oldest surviving friend, my brother." Whether on stage and off, Lesh's reaction underscores the depth of personal and musical loss the surviving members felt. Garcia's funeral took place on August 12, 1995, at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Belvedere. It was attended by his family, band members, and close friends, including luminaries like superfan and NBA Hall of Famer Bill Walton and musician Bob Dylan. Notably, Deborah Coons, Garcia's third wife and co-executrix, barred two of Garcia's former wives from attending. Just a day after the funeral, approximately 25,000 people gathered at the polo fields in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Fans brought flowers, memorabilia, and held spontaneous tributes, some even playing bagpipes rendering Amazing Grace. In the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, where the band first burst onto the scene in the 1960s, a single white rose was tied to a tree near their old house, becoming an impromptu shrine to the icon. And then just a few months after his death in April 1996, Bob Weir and Deborah Coons, accompanied by guitarist Sanjay Mishra, conducted a private ceremony to scatter a portion of Garcia's ashes into India's holy Ganges River shortly after a lunar eclipse. The remaining ashes were then spread into the San Francisco Bay.
I have to tell you, Jason, the death of Jerry Garcia loomed very, very large in my life. My mother was an avowed Deadhead. She was one of those people who traded bootlegs, CDs. She was much more of the hippie ilk back in the day before she
turned right wing.
Before she turned right wing recently in my life. But she was a very big hippie. She had to make love, not war over a bed, and so forth. And so their presence has an outsized sort of importance in my mind. I wonder where this landed for you. They weren't the Beatles. Yeah. I'm not trying to overstate who the Grateful Dead, but their fans were the most ardent.
For me personally, they were not a huge influence growing up, but I certainly had friends who adored them, revered them in a way that maybe Taylor Swift's fans approximate now, or maybe the Beatles fans back in the day. But I don't think there's anybody as devoted to their band as Deadheads were to the Grateful Dead.
We mentioned Bill Walton. He was always in the tie-dye shirts. He was a true Deadhead.
People who loved them saw hundreds of their concerts. I mean, obviously, concert tickets were a lot cheaper there. I think their tickets were particularly cheap. They often played in open-air festivals and parks. But you could get in for a song and go, and it was not just about seeing the music. You would spend a full day there. Obviously, the drug culture was a huge part of it, intertwined with it. I want to go back and talk about something we talked about just before we went on air.
Yes.
Which is the age of Jerry Garcia at 53 years old. I did not know that until you read. I would have assumed he was in his 70s. He was a man. He was obviously gravely ill for a long time.
He was overweight.
Not take care of his body at all. I thought, had you asked me literally 15 minutes ago how old he was when he died, I would have said 70.
Yeah. You know, they were of the hippie generation, and it was 1995 when he passed, so it does make sense that he was only 53 because he was a young man when the Grateful Dead started, but he was quite young. I mean, the 50s is young. And to your point, I think it's a great one. Unlike bands like the Beatles that you might save up for and go to one concert and it would be a life-changing moment, Beatlemania, if you were a Deadhead, you went to tons of concerts. It was a cultural event, kind of like Burning Man. You go every year. You would try to follow the band around. It was much cheaper, more of a music festival vibe than sort of saving up hundreds of dollars to go to a concert once. And that was the vibe.
I have a friend actually who's been to hundreds of Nine Inch Nails concerts, which I don't understand because how many great songs does Nine Inch Nails have? But people who love the Grateful Dead were so devoted to the band and to the music and to the culture that I don't think there's ever anything like it. I mean, we'll
talk about their heir apparent is Phish, obviously, is the band that sort of followed suit and feels most like the Grateful Dead. Still feels like a hollow shadow of fame.
And maybe it's just the diffuse nature of music now and art now, but boy, they were something.
They were something. But notwithstanding all of the touching tributes and mellow hippie vibes in public, there was drama behind the scenes. Garcia's estate, estimated between $7 and $15 million, quickly became embroiled in disputes, with claims ultimately totaling around $50 million. His third wife, Deborah Coons, allegedly halted alimony payments to his second wife, prompting litigation and eventually a ruling that involved the estate being ordered to fork over around $4 million, though a swift settlement brought that figure down somewhat. There was also a dispute over 4 custom guitars used by Garcia, which kept the estate mired in probate for many, many years until it was finally dissolved upon disposition of all the assets in 2008. So as genial as he was and sort of a lovable figure, he had lots of wives, a really messy personal life.
He didn't take care of his finances any better than he took care of his body. He was just a man who loved to play music.
A lot of drama.
Did a lot of drugs and had a lot of drama. And then once he died, it was sort of left to the survivors to pick up the pieces.
That's right.
Despite some of the acrimonious legal battles, the grief among fans, especially committed Deadheads like Bill Walton and others, remained a powerful force in the Grateful Dead fan community. Just as fans had traded bootleg tapes of performances over the years, they started swapping stories and engaging in spontaneous tributes for years to come. And because enthusiasm for the band continued in the wake of Garcia's passing, The remaining Grateful Dead members eventually regrouped under new names, such as The Other Ones, The Dead, and Dead and Company over the years. The eventual resumption of live performances, featuring core members like Bob Weir and Mickey Hart, signaled a determination to keep the music alive.
Jerry Garcia's life and career are inseparable from the story of the Grateful Dead, a band that came to symbolize the ideals, contradictions, and excesses of the 1960s counterculture. Born in 1942 in San Francisco, Garcia was steeped early in folk, bluegrass, and rock and roll. He gravitated toward the guitar as his primary voice, and his eclectic influences, ranging from bluegrass banjo legends like Earl Scruggs to bluesmen like B.B. King and Chuck Berry, would shape a style that was equal parts nimble, melodic, and exploratory. By the mid-'60s, Garcia had become a fixture of the Bay Area folk scene, but his true calling emerged when he joined forces with Phil Lesh, Bob Weir, Ron Pigpen McKernan, and Bill Kreutzmann to form a group that would soon rename itself the Grateful Dead. There may be no better example of a right place at the right time than Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead's rise to fame in the San Francisco scene of the mid-'60s. The band's ascent coincided perfectly with the rise of the San Francisco counterculture. In 1965 and 66, the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood was the epicenter of a youth movement rejecting mainstream values, and Garcia and his bandmates became its unofficial house band. They played at Ken Kesey's acid tests, blending music with the experimental use of LSD, which became a defining element of their concerts. Unlike more polished contemporaries such as Jefferson Airplane or The Doors, the Dead weren't chasing hit singles or radio play. Instead, their appeal lay in the freedom and unpredictability of their live shows, which could turn a 3-minute song into a half-hour journey of improvisational detours and unexpected turns. This approach defined not only their sound, but an entire genre of so-called jam bands.
Musically, Garcia anchored the group with a style that was both versatile and deeply expressive. He could pivot seamlessly from psychedelic freakouts to country ballads, from bluesy riffs to delicate folk picking. His approach to the guitar and to band leadership was understated, preferring to guide the music rather than dominate it. The Dead's concerts were famously communal experiences, with Garcia at the center, not as a dictator, but as a facilitator of the collective sound. This ethos extended to their fans, who became known as Deadheads, a fiercely loyal community that followed the band from city to city, taping shows, trading recordings, and building an alternative network of music sharing decades before the internet made it commonplace with programs like Napster and LimeWire. Partly as a consequence of this ethos to community over corporatism, commercial success came slowly for the Grateful Dead. While they never dominated the singles charts like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, their albums eventually became staples of the rock canon. Songs like Ripple, Sugar Magnolia, Friend of the Devil, and Truckin' are as anthemic and iconic as anything released during the heyday of the 60s, when the charts were dominated by some of the biggest acts in rock history like the Beatles and the Stones.
Truckin', got my chips cashed in, keep truckin', like the Doodah Man together, more or less in line, just keep truckin' on.
Still, Touch of Grey, released in 1987, remains their only top 10 single, peaking at number 9 in the Billboard Hot 100, and its accompanying video with skeleton puppets playing instruments introduced the band to MTV's younger generation. By the end of their careers, the Dead had sold more than 35 million albums worldwide and achieved multiple gold and platinum certifications, proving that a band built on improvisation and community could still achieve mainstream recognition without sacrificing its identity.
Yet the Dead's true legacy can't be measured by chart performance or album sales alone. Their concerts, which often stretched beyond 3 hours and featured wildly different set lists from night to night, became legendary. Fans delighted in hearing a song reimagined in a new key, stretched to twice its length, or seamlessly woven into another tune. No two shows were ever the same, and this unpredictability created an enduring sense of adventure. While critics sometimes dismissed the Dead's albums as uneven, their reputation as a live act was unparalleled. By the 1980s and early 1990s, the band was selling out stadiums across the country, rivaling the touring power of acts like the Stones and U2.
It just occurred to me.
This is the magic of the Grateful Dead.
I had never put two and two together before. The fact that their concerts were somewhat impromptu, right? They would just start singing different songs and playing different set lists. Taylor Swift echoes that today, right? Her big thing,
Yes.
and the thing that every kid follows online, my daughter's a huge Swiftie, is what surprise songs is she going to play tonight? And it keeps that level of expectation that keep people coming back to the concerts.
You are
That's
a one.
exactly what I never thought about that before. It's exactly how they were able to keep on doing it.
You're 100% right, because I have some of their albums. My mom passed them down to me, and they're not the best produced albums. They don't have the best sort of audio equipment. That's not what they were about. They were about differentiating the live experience. They weren't about selling records. That was basically the songs, but the 15-minute version of Ripple from the show in San Francisco is what people cite to you. When you say what Dead, when they traded the bootlegs, it's like you got to hear where they did Sugar Magnolia here.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible.
Really quick anecdote about their music. Truckin' is, I think, they're by far their most famous song. It's the one that people who are not Deadheads like me know. I can sing some of the lyrics, that sort of thing. True Deadheads hate that because I'm the poser, and they're like, no, it's Ripple, it's Touch of Grey. There's some other songs that are much bigger for them.
The only bigger poser is the one who loves Touch of Grey.
Yeah,
because
right.
Touch of Grey was when I was a kid. It was like, the
fair.
skeletons were dancing. You remember the music video?
Yes, but I was a little bit old for that. But you're right. That
Yes.
is for you're 10 years younger than me. For that, 9 years younger than me. Let's be clear.
Yeah. That was their chart topper, though.
Yours Touch of Grey. Mine was Truckin'. That was just like what every non-Deadhead cites to as the Dead song.
You were the narc there.
Yeah, exactly,
You know,
exactly.
that's the guy who
didn't belong.
Right, exactly. Garcia himself became a reluctant icon of this world, though. With his shaggy beard, disheveled clothes, and gentle demeanor, he embodied a kind of everyman mysticism. He never courted celebrity, yet he became a symbol of freedom, experimentation, and alternative culture. Even as his health declined from years of hard living, Garcia remained the gravitational center of the Dead, and his guitar tone, at once searching and soothing, continued to guide generations of listeners.
The Grateful Dead's cultural impact extended beyond music into the very notion of what a band could be. By allowing fans to tape and trade shows, they created one of the first decentralized, grassroots distribution networks in modern music history. Rather than policing their intellectual property, Garcia and the Dead understood that giving their music away only deepened fan loyalty. This openness created a culture of sharing that would later echo in the digital age, from peer-to-peer file sharing to streaming communities. Their model stood in stark contrast to artists who jealously guarded their work, showing that generosity could be just as powerful as control in building a legacy. In the years since Garcia's death in 1995, the Grateful Dead's influence has remained vibrant. Surviving members have carried the torch in groups like The Dead, Further, and most recently, Dead & Company, keeping the music alive for both old fans and new generations. And, of course, the jam band tradition the Dead pioneered lives on and most prominently through Phish, whose long concerts, exploratory extended live versions of songs, and dedicated fan culture are direct descendants of the Dead's blueprint. And Phish is not a one-off. Acts like Widespread Panic, String Cheese Incident, and Umphrey's McGee continue to expand the model, proving the durability of Garcia's vision.
Jason, I really do think it's brilliant that you brought up Taylor Swift, though, because she's kind of the heir apparent of making live shows events, right? The Eras Tour, look, she's much bigger than the Grateful Dead ever were or could ever be. But that piece of Taylor Swift where you have to go to her shows, you have to trade friendship bracelets, it's not that far from you got to be at this Dead show, you got to remember this version of Ripple, you got to, I dropped acid in Poughkeepsie when I saw the Dead. That's Taylor.
What do you think she would say if you had one question to ask her and you asked, do you realize you're standing on the shoulders of the Grateful Dead in what you do? She'd be like, who?
Yeah. Bill Lesh crawled so you could walk. Yeah. Anyway, Jerry Garcia's legacy stretches far beyond his guitar solos and the psychedelic swirl of the Grateful Dead's music. It lies in the culture he and the band created around openness, community, and shared experience. Unlike artists such as Prince, who guarded their intellectual property jealously with fierce intensity, Garcia embraced a radically different philosophy. The music belonged to everyone. But it wasn't naivete about the business realities or capitulation to an intractable problem with bootlegging. Rather, the Dead encouraged fans to record those shows, trade the tapes, and spread the sound across the world, creating one of the first and most enduring grassroots networks in modern music. That decision, more than any radio hit or platinum record, cemented their place in history, not as a band chasing profits, but as a living organism feeding off the devotion of its fans. In doing so, Garcia laid the groundwork for the entire jam band movement, inspiring generations of artists to focus on live performance, improvisation, and the unspoken contract between musicians and their audience. The Dead's gift was simple but profound. They put their fans first, and in return, the fans built them a legacy no amount of corporate protection could ever buy. And so I wanted to give the final word to Jerry Garcia himself. Heard here with bandmate Bob Weir during an interview in 1982 on David Letterman, in which they explained the band's philosophy about allowing and even encouraging the sharing of their music.
And as a matter of fact, you don't mind people taping your music in concerts?
Not particularly.
Now,
no.
why? That seems to be defeating the idea of selling records.
Well, if we ever make a real good record, then probably they'll rush out and buy that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and besides, the tapes bring back memories to them and all that kind of stuff.
And the shows are never the same ever.
Yeah.
I mean, not even ever. You know. I mean, so
Sometimes
it's
they're remotely the same.
yeah, sort of. And when we're done with it, they can have it. You know.